What's up, everybody? It's your boy Shane G. We are back again with another episode of Politics as Usual, right here on the Ethos Media Network. Before we get any further, please make sure you like, you share, and you subscribe for all of the latest content. And if you really like the content, we encourage you to sign up on patreon.com/Ethos Media Network. You'll get exclusive content there, exclusive interviews, just a lot of stuff that's not on YouTube. You know what I mean? It's a good time over there. So, but first of all, want to salute Isaiah Thomas. I got my hat on. I got my Aaliyah shirt on. It is 313 day. You know what I'm saying? This is March 13th. This is 313 day. So I want to say salute to all my Detroit people. But let's get to it. So what I want to talk to you all about is I actually recorded this video once, but when I looked back at it, I felt like I came out too emotional. And you guys know I like to really be fact-based when I'm presenting information to you. I don't like it to be very emotional and, you know, me talking about my feelings about things and stuff like that. It's more so I want to show the realities of these situations so that way people understand where the feelings come from. Okay. So with that being said, there's a video by Tupac where he is discussing something that I feel like we all can relate to. More and more of us can actually relate to this today than probably back then. Back then, it was probably a little bit more racially defined. You know, more people of color were, you know, not doing as well financially, you know, whereas, you know, our white counterparts were doing a lot better. Whereas now, there's so many even of our white neighbors who are struggling financially that they're feeling how we've been feeling for a long time, right? So there's a lot of commonality there. As far as the frustration, you know, towards authority, towards power, things of that nature. So I just want to play this video because I feel like it's relevant today, even though he said these words in the early 90s. You know, they always said that he was very prophetic in the way that he spoke, and I think this is just an example of that. So let's take a look.
Yeah, my raps are filled with rage.
One of these days, we gotta bust back for the home, man.
You have to be logical. You know, if I know that in this hotel room they have food every day, and I'm knocking on the door every day to eat, and they open the door, let me see the party, let me see like them throwing salami all over I mean, just like throwing food around. But they're telling me there's no food in here. You know what I'm saying? Every day. I'm standing outside trying to sing my way in. You know what I'm saying? We are hungry, please let us in. We are hungry, please let us in. After about a week, that song is going to change to we hungry, we need some food. After 2-3 weeks, it's like, you know, give me all the food, breaking out the door. And after a year, you just like, you know what I'm saying? I'm picking the lock, coming through the door, blasting, you know what I'm saying? It's like you hungry, you reached your level, you don't want any more. We asked 10 years ago. We was asking with the Panthers. We was asking with them, you know, with civil rights movement. We was asking, you know, now those people that were asking, they're all dead and in jail. So now what do you think we're going to do? Ask?
I put my gun
All right. Wanted to cut that off before, you know, any music copyright situations. But let's get into that, right? So what did he say there? He said that the people who were asking, you know, they're all locked up, dead, or in jail. You know, in modern times, I would just say that those people either who are asking have either capitulated, you know what I'm saying, to the power. They figured their way into the power and they left everybody else behind and were like, hey, I figured it out. Y'all figure it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like there's a lot of that mentality. But what I want to talk about is the material reasons for why that type of attitude exists, why people are ready to pick the lock coming through the door blasting, as Tupac said. You know what I'm saying? We saw examples of it on January 6th. Now, whether you agree or disagree with their reasoning for being there, whether you felt like that was a silly reason that they were there, you know what I'm saying? That is to the side. The fact that people were that frustrated, that didn't happen with Bush, that didn't happen with Obama, that didn't happen with anybody else. You know what I'm saying? So there's a reason for that level of frustration. You know, so that's what I want to tackle today. Why is everybody so angry? Why are we seeing all of these different, wars amongst people? Not war, literal war. I mean, even though that's obviously there too. But I mean, as far as like these cultural wars that we're seeing, where it's, men versus women and cisgender people versus trans people, and there's a lot of there's just a lot of angst in society as a whole, and I want to break down, in my opinion, why I think that is. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I want to discuss is the ability to unionize, right? So I was talking to my mom the other day, and she was telling me that because she's a UAW worker, now mind you, she's been retired for, if not 20 years, close to 20 years at this point. She was telling us, me and my brother, she was telling us how she recently just got an increase in benefits and in pay for her retirement. You know why that is because the Ford employees last year went on a strike, and they were able to get a lot of the things that, they wanted in that deal. And so that benefited my retired parents who haven't worked for the company in, like I said, close to 20 years. So that's one of the positive things about unions. Another thing is you can't just get fired willy-nilly. You know what I mean? Like if you get the job and you're a union rep, they have to have a legit reason to let you go. They can't just get rid of you, because you got the wrong color shirt on or whatever. Which they can do in right to work states. You know what I'm saying? They can let you go for little, or they can let you go. The paperwork always says for any or no reason. So that means they can literally fire you because your shoe is untied and they don't like that. They like tidiness. You get what I'm saying? Like it is, that seems crazy, but that's the way it's written in right to work states. So that's why unions are important. Lefties, people who, vote Democrat, who view themselves as lefties, progressives, socialists, everything on the left side of the actual political spectrum, not the American political spectrum, but the world political spectrum. Everybody on the left side of the center pretty much agrees that unions are a good thing. So our Democratic president, Mr. Joe Biden, Mr. Pro-Union, Mr. Pro-Worker, this is what he did last year. Why his nickname was Union Joe. Why Union Joe chose to make it illegal for railroad workers to strike. This article is part of the DC Brief Times Politics newsletter. Sign up here. Oh, okay. Yeah. So want to know how worried Washington was about a rail strike? Typically reliable union champions Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi successfully rallied rank and file Democrats to side with railroad executives over their workers. This is from Time magazine. You read that correctly. Biden decided the broader economy was a bigger priority than 100,000 freight rail workers having any paid sick leave in their next contract. Now, let's just stop there. The reason they were striking is because they do not get sick time. And the way that their sick time, they have sick time, but they're essentially not really able to use it. Here's what I mean by that. The sick time that they had to be scheduled. You understand? So like if you got sick last night after you left work and then you're sick this morning, you can't call out and say, hey, I'm not going to make it. I'm sick. You would have had to somehow known like a month ahead of time that you were going to be sick on this particular day and then schedule out. And that's suspect. You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously, if you're calling out ahead of time, sick time, unless you have a doctor's appointment that day, they're going to say, how do you know you're going to be sick on that day? So it's one of those stupid loopholes that they use to say, no, we give sick time. Not really. So that's what that means. So they were negotiating in the strike to have legitimate sick time. But Biden didn't want that. After campaigning as the most pro-union presidential candidate in history, Biden signed into law a measure that makes a railroad strike illegal. Like the auto and Wall Street bailouts, the railroad worker is likely to be an unpopular move, but ultimately one that defines a Biden legacy as much as his green energy agenda, his infrastructure investments, and his reboot of U.S. foreign policy in the post-Trump era. It was a tough call for the White House and for Biden personally, but one that ultimately is the kind that only gets to a president's desk when everything else fails. It may deflate part of his political base. Biden carried union households over Trump by 14 points in 2020. Bet you that's not going to be the case this year. And Democrats carried them by 15 points last month, but it may also sustain his governing power. The House on Wednesday passed a bill that would force management and labor to accept a White House negotiated deal that 8 of the 12 unions at the table had already agreed to. The remaining 4, however, represent more than half of the nation's unionized freight rail workers. So do you understand that? They passed a bill. So the way that they're framing this is, no, the majority of the unions agree with this. So that means it's a good thing. But they're not taking into account that the other 4 unions make up more than half of all of the railroad workers. So that's very disingenuous the way they're doing that. That's almost like saying, oh, well, you know, the state of Idaho and the state of Wyoming and the state of, you know, South Dakota, those 3 states all together, they decided that this was a good thing, but California was against it. So, you know, California got outranked. Yeah, but how many people are in California versus those other 3 states combined? How many more people is it going to affect if we don't do the thing that Cali would want to do versus the thing that those other 3 states want to do? That's what you're seeing here. So even though 12 unions agree to this, it's going to still be slanted towards the executives and the workers. More workers than not are still going to be screwed over by this deal, which is why they continued striking. And then they made it illegal. On Thursday, under pressure from the White House and Wall Street, the Senate followed, and by Friday afternoon, Biden was in the Roosevelt Room of the White House to sign a deal that leveraged the government's power to keep workers on the job if they're linked to interstate commerce. So basically, what we're seeing there is Joe Biden decided that businesses being able to transport goods and make their money was more important than workers being able to get sick time, you know, fair pay, the other things that they were striking for. So that's one reason for all this frustration. You know what I'm saying? Workers are still getting shitted on. Speaking of workers, let's go to this one from Investopedia. Underemployment. That's a big issue. You know, you're going to hear a lot about how many jobs people have now and, oh my God, we're growing the economy, and you're going to hear all of that. But what they don't talk about is underemployment. Now, what is underemployment? Let's take a look. This is from Investopedia once again. Underemployment is a measure of the total number of people in an economy who are unwillingly working in a low skill and low paying job, or only part-time because they can't get a full-time job that uses their skills. Underemployment, as well as unemployment, is counted in U.S. government reports in order to provide a truer picture of the health of the job market. So these are the key takeaways. We're not going to go through the whole article, but if you want to look it up, again, you see where it's at. Underemployment is a measure of employment and labor utilization in the economy that looks at how well the labor force is being used in terms of skill, experience, and availability to work. It refers to a situation in which individuals are forced to work in low-paying or low-skill jobs. Visible underemployment and invisible underemployment are types of underemployment. Underemployment can be caused by a variety of factors, from economic recessions to business cycles. The unemployment rate is calculated based solely on the labor force, which does not include persons who are seeking a job. So one of the things that I learned about underemployment as well is a way that you can think about it is, let's say, for example, you used to work at a job that paid you $30 an hour. And you worked at that job for 15 years and you built your life based on that amount of income. You know, your living situation is based on that. You know, whatever traveling you do, whatever expenses and bills and things like that you've accumulated over that 15 years. That's all based on that salary that you were making for that 15 years, that $30 an hour. Now, let's say that company goes through a merger and you get laid off. And then the only other place that you can do that same job is only paying $20 an hour now. That would be underemployment. That would be one case of underemployment. Another example of underemployment would be if you're a factory worker, for example. And let's say you, again, same 15 years, same $30 an hour. You've been, all the same scenario, and you live, in the Bible Belt somewhere, right? And then they shut down that factory. They ship all those jobs overseas, and then they put a Walmart in your city, and now you work at Walmart for $12 an hour. That would be an example of underemployment, because your skills say, and your history says, that you should be making at least $30 an hour based on the skill set that you have displayed for that previous 15 years. But because of the circumstances around you, there is no other job that, with your set of skills, without having to learn an entirely new trade starting all the way from scratch, so that's underemployment. There's way more people in that situation than they like to give credit for, because they like to say that people have jobs. So one person working 3 jobs, that's 3 different jobs that they say were created in the job market, even though it's one person that's working all 3 of them. And it doesn't include things in the gig economy like Uber, Lyft, things of that nature. So those are a lot of, I'm sure, underemployed people as well. But because they have a car, and that's, a for sure way that you can at least generate money, you're not even necessarily going to make a lot of money doing it, because they limit your hours. You're only allowed to work, drive for 12 hours a day. They'll shut the app off. You know what I'm saying? Now, that's a safety thing, but when gas and all of that kind of stuff is constantly eating away at the only way that you're bringing in income, then of course some days you're going to want to drive 14, 16 hours, you know what I'm saying, to make that extra bread, because that's how desperate people's situations are. So that's underemployment. Now, here's a few things that I want to talk about, because I think all of these things coincide with what happened in the 90s. This was sort of a big buildup of things that happened leading to what Joe Biden did in the 90s, which I'm going to get to. So the next thing we're going to talk about is white flight. Now, why do I bring up white flight? Because there are a lot more. Now, again, Tupac in the video that I played at the beginning was speaking more from a racial angle. So he was saying, he was speaking basically about like the Panthers and, the civil rights leaders and things like that who have, passed away or got locked up fighting for our rights. But so now the thing is, again, in the inner cities where mostly, brown and black people live, there seems to be, a correlation with more crime, more violence, things like that. And why is that? When it's been proven throughout history that black and brown people are more than capable of creating our own civilizations, our own currencies, running our own businesses, all of these things. This has been proven throughout history multiple times. So it's like, why weren't we able to really do that here? This is one of the reasons. So white flight, what is it? White flight or white exodus is a term that insinuates racial motivation for sudden or gradual large-scale migrations of white people from areas simultaneously gaining population of other racial groups. Starting in the 1950s and 1960s, the term became popular in the United States. So what was happening? So let me just break that down a little bit easier, because so basically white flight is you have a group of white people that live in a city. You have a group of black and brown people who want to move into that city. And as they move in, all the white people move out. And eventually that city becomes a black and brown city. Now, what happens when you do that? Well, again, what was happening in the 1950s and 60s around that time to where this would be happening? Well, black people were allowed to buy property. They were allowed to buy homes in areas where they previously weren't allowed to. So you have a lot of migration from the south to the north happening. You have a lot of inner city to the suburbs happening. There's all of this you're having out, because at the time it was the reverse. All the white people actually lived in the inner city and black and brown people lived everywhere else. That started to change. And then when we started moving into the inner cities, well, who was already there? It was, white people who established all of the businesses and the economy that were in the inner city that black people and brown people didn't live in. White people. So when white people leave, what do they take with them? All of the economic resources. They basically leave the place destitute aside from the houses. So when that happens, you basically leave all the black and brown people who moved there with nothing. And that's how you get a ghetto. Because now, instead of them being able to enjoy the same things that everyone who lived there previously are able to enjoy, now they have nothing, and they either have to, again, try to rebuild it, or now they have to worry about people who live next to them who are desperate and might do something to them. So you see violence rise, and we'll get into that in a moment too. But I just wanted to cover the topic of white flight real quick because it goes into this topic as well, redlining. Now, I've mentioned this before, but I've never really broke it down by definition, so I do want to talk about it. Redlining is a discriminatory practice in which financial services are withheld from neighborhoods that have significant numbers of racial and ethnic minorities. Redlining has been most prominent in the United States and has been directed against mostly directed against African Americans. The most common examples involve denial of credit and insurance, denial of health care, and the development of food deserts in minority neighborhoods. So what that is, again, basically that goes right along with the white flight that I was just telling you about. So all the white people leave the neighborhood. It becomes a black and brown neighborhood or city. And then redlining is a discriminatory practice in which I say, oh, your city's mostly black, mostly brown, mostly black and brown. No, there's a liability there because of the racial makeup. So therefore, we're not going to provide these financial services for you. So that's part of what you see in the inner city as well. That's why you see more, probably, I would say, there's, depending on the level you're talking about, more people are doing illegal things for money in the inner city, whether that be drugs, whether that's scamming, whether that's whatever it is, robbery, you know what I'm saying? You're going to see more of that in the inner city than you would in other places. And the reason why is because, again, there's no financial services that they're able to obtain. That's a big difference between the ghetto and trailer parks, because trailer parks financially are basically, I used to call it the white projects all the time. And in a sense, that's what it is, but you don't see the same levels of violence. And I think that that redlining is a big reason why you would see that, because the racial makeup of a trailer park is still going to be mostly white. It's not going to be black and brown for the, from what I've seen throughout my whole life. I'm sure there's black people in trailer. I'm not saying all, you get what I'm saying. I'm speaking generally. Generally, you're going to find mostly white people in trailer parks. You're going to find mostly black people in the projects. So why do you not see the same level of violence? Well, because they're afforded opportunities still financially that if it was a black trailer park, they wouldn't be afforded. Healthcare, financial services, real estate, being able to purchase things. That's what your boy Trump was doing in the late 70s. That's the real reason to call him racist. It's because he was redlining against black owners of businesses and homes in his apartment buildings. He refused to let them rent, even if they had the credit and the money. He was like, nah, you're black. I'm not doing it. So that's racism. If you want to call Trump racist, that's your real bread and butter example right there. Can't nobody refute that. So, these are some of the reasons why black and brown people in particular are extremely frustrated and have been for a long time. The union thing and the jobs thing, I definitely feel have contributed to more middle America starting to feel that same pain that a lot of black and brown people have been feeling since, we've been here. So the next thing, this is from The Guardian. Here's another thing that, would help a lot of us. He has the power to do this, but just won't. How Biden helped create the student debt problem he now promises to fix. This article is more than 4 years old. He has not fixed the problem. In 10 weeks' time, Joe Biden will lay Joe's vision for America at the feet of Iowa's caucus goers in the hope that the first voters in the Democratic presidential race will put him on the road to the White House. Among his promises is that he will fix the student loan crisis, saddling 45 million Americans with crippling debt, now totaling a staggering $1.5 trillion. One idea is to allow people struggling to repay private student loans owed banks and credit card companies to discharge them in bankruptcy. That didn't happen. The pledge is one of the most striking policies on offer from Democratic candidates in the 2020 race, given how the problem Biden now proposes to resolve came in the first place. Private student loans were largely stripped of bankruptcy protections in 2005, literally the year I graduated high school. Ain't that a bitch? You know what I'm saying? The year I graduated high school and went to college is the year they decided, no protections for y'all. In a congressional move that had the devastating impact of crippling such debt over a decade and locking in millions of Americans to years of grueling repayments. The Republican-led bill tightened the bankruptcy code, unleashing a huge giveaway to lenders at the expense of indebted student borrowers. At the time, it faced vociferous opposition from 25 Democrats in the U.S. Senate, but it passed anyway, with 18 Democratic senators breaking ranks and casting their vote in favor of the bill. One of those 18, one politician stood out as an especially enthusiastic champion of the credit companies who, as it happens, had given him hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions, Joe Biden. Joe Biden signed on to the bill that made it so that student loans, along with medical debt, are the only two types of debt that you cannot file bankruptcy on. Imagine if you were able to file bankruptcy on your student loans right now. 45 million Americans would be in a financially much better place. Because they've been, when they suspended them for the 2 years or whatever during COVID, that helped a lot of people out. That helped me out, I know for sure. You know what I'm saying? I was really happy to not be getting all those phone calls. I was really happy to not have my checks garnished. I was really happy about all of that. Like, having more money in my pocket definitely was a solid thing. And guess who did that? Fucking Trump. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is why people are angry. This is why people are angry, because Trump is trash, but he did that. He's the one who paused the student loans. He's the one who actually gave out $1,600, no questions asked. I didn't get $1 from Biden because I owe, student loan money. So they just took it for that. You know what I'm saying? Trump sent me the check. I actually got the check from Trump. And I hate this nigga. So it's like, what do you want me to do when both options are so terrible? Like, what do you want me to do? Moving on. This is the last reason that everybody's so upset right here. Not the last reason. Let me stop there. But this is another huge reason. And by the way, I haven't mentioned war on here really at all. But obviously the whole funding Israel, doing their genocide of Palestine, obviously that's definitely slowly bankrupting us funding Ukraine, which Biden during his State of the Union address said, I'm for sure going to keep doing. Yep. Shit like that. While all of us are, over here struggling, the middle class is disappearing. 67% of people can't afford an $1,000 emergency. I want to say 67% of people for sure are living check to check. I know that much. And what does check to check means? That means once you spend all of the money on your check to pay bills, you have nothing left over. That's what that means. That means you pay your rent, you put gas in your car, you buy some groceries, and you pay to keep the lights on. You know what I'm saying? Your water bill, all of that type of shit, your cell phone bill. Once all that's paid, $0 until your next check. That's what check to check means. And 67% of the country lives like that. The controversial 1994 crime law that Joe Biden helped write explain. Biden has taken credit for the 1994 crime law, but critics say the law contributed to mass incarceration. One of the most controversial criminal justice issues in the 2020 election may be a tough on crime law passed 26 years ago and authored by Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. So he wrote that bill. He wrote the damn bill. If you ask some criminal justice reform activists, the 1994 crime law passed by Congress and signed by President Bill Clinton, which was meant to reverse decades of rising crime, was one of the key contributors to mass incarceration in the 1990s. They say it led to more prison sentences, more prison cells, and more aggressive policing, especially hurting Black and brown Americans who are disproportionately likely to be incarcerated. If you ask Biden, that's not true at all. The law, he's argued on the campaign trail, had little impact on incarceration, which largely happens at the state level. As recently as, keep that point in mind, largely happens at the state level. Cool. As recently as 2016, Biden defended the law, arguing it restored American cities following an era of high crime and violence. Truth, it turns out, is somewhere in the middle. That's being very kind, Vox. The 1994 crime law was certainly meant to increase incarceration in an attempt to crack down on crime, but its implementation doesn't appear to have done much in that area. And while the law had many provisions that are now considered highly controversial, some portions, including the Violence Against Women Act and the assault weapons ban, are fairly popular among Democrats. Now, mind you, we talk about this assault weapons ban constantly as if it wasn't signed in the law in 1994. So that's not the issue when it comes to mass shootings. It's not these type of weapons because they're already illegal. That's how politicians like Biden, as well as previous Democratic rivals like Senator Bernie Sanders, can now justify their votes for the law by pointing out to the provisions that weren't tough on crime. But with Biden's criminal justice record coming under scrutiny as he runs for president, it's the mass incarceration provisions that are drawing particular attention as a key example of how Biden helped fuel the exact same policies that criminal justice reformers are trying to reverse. And while Biden has released sweeping criminal justice reform plans that aim to, in some sense, undo the damage of policies he previously championed, he didn't do that. Trump did, which, again, it pains me to say that Trump did better in criminal justice than a Democrat would. Like, I mean, it doesn't pain me to say it really anymore. It's obvious at this point, but that shit should sound crazy to anybody who still believes that the Democrats are a left-wing party in any sense. Biden's history has led to skepticisms among some progressives and reformers. How about all? Now, with Tuesday's presidential debate looming, the 1994 law may be another way for President Donald Trump to attack Biden as Trump tries to spin his own punitive criminal justice record positively. So let's get down to here, because the 1994 crime law had a lot in it. Absolutely. But look at this right here. Remember when Biden said, nah, the crime bill didn't really do too much as far as the mass incarceration thing. It didn't really have too much to do with that, because the thing is, that usually happens at the state level. That's not even really a federal thing like that. That's what Biden said, right? Well, Bible reveled in the politics of the 1994 law, bragging after it passed that the liberal wing of the Democratic Party was now for 60 new death penalties, 70 enhanced penalties, 100,000 cops, and 125,000 new state prison cells. The law imposed tougher prison sentences at the federal level and encouraged states to do the same. It provided funds for states to build more prisons, aimed to fund 100,000 more cops, and back grant programs that encourage police officers to carry out more drug-related arrests and escalation of the war on drugs. So, once again, the law imposed tougher prison sentences at the federal level and encouraged states to do the same. It provided funds for states to build more prisons. So who do you think got the money? What states do you think got the money? The ones that listened to the feds or the ones that said, no, we're going to keep doing things our way? Who do you think? They were actively encouraging police officers to carry out more drug-related arrests. So why isn't assault and murder and, grape and, stuff like that? Like, why wouldn't that be more of a priority than just like, oh, if somebody has some coke in their pocket, take them to prison? You know what I'm saying? Like, why would that be the case? Well, money is the reason. Money's the reason. These are all private prisons, mind you, a lot of these. So that's why. Private prisons make more money based on how many people are filling the beds. If the beds are full, whoever owns that prison is making a lot of money from the state. That's how that all ties together. So do you see a lot of why people are upset? These are the reasons why people are upset. A lot of that affects certain communities more than others, but I think I've illustrated a good point as far as in 2024 on 313 Day, why people are upset. Let me know your thoughts on it. Why do you think people are so upset? And when I brought up earlier, the LGBT versus, the world, white privilege conversations getting brought up a lot more, you know what I mean? Which I've addressed that on this channel, you know what I mean? It's a real thing, but I don't think it's necessarily always helpful to bring up in conversation. That's pretty much my stance on it, but it's real. Anyway, but yeah, like, all the men versus women, why is there so much tension? You know what I'm saying? Why is there so much tension? And the reason why, I think, is because when you tie all of these things together and you realize that the person in charge right now is one of the main reasons that everything's fucked for everybody right now, maybe you have the answer to your question. Maybe the guy in charge right now is not the guy that should have ever been in charge. Maybe the guy in charge right now is the reason why we're in the situation we're in financially. Why all of us have relatives that have been locked up for way too long and, over shit that shouldn't even be illegal in a lot of cases. But they know what they're doing. That's the thing. They know what they're doing. The problem is, and I say this a lot, they just don't care about you. That's the thing. You have to get that in your head. They don't care about you. If you can get on board with that notion that they don't care about you, then a lot of this will make a lot more sense. If you're still operating under the notion that, no, they have values and they have morals and sometimes they just have to compromise because it's hard and blah, blah. If you still think that, then I encourage you to go back and watch the rest of my playlist. You know what I mean? Politics as usual. Please go back and watch, all the videos. Hopefully that'll be enough to illustrate the point. But yeah, that's why we're in the situation we're in today. So you guys can thank the current leader of the United States, Mr. Joe Biden. He's a huge reason for every problem that we really see in society today. It all boils down to economics. I heard it simply put: when the economy's doing well, the president wins. The economy was not doing well under Trump. He lost. He was also Donald Trump, but he's probably going to win. He's probably going to win this year. That's the crazy thing. Like, he got voted out. I don't remember that happening ever. Like, I don't think that's happened in my lifetime. It hasn't. You either win back to back or you're a one-termer. That's how it works. So the fact that he lost, another dude took over, and he's about to run again and probably win is nuts. But that's how bad of a job the Democrats have done. If the economy was better, Biden would win, and there wouldn't even, but he didn't fix anything. Everything got worse. Everything has been consistently getting worse for like really probably since the Iraq War. If you really think about it, since the Iraq War, your average person's life has just like that the whole time. Ever since 2002, 2003, it's been downhill. Then you had the housing crash in 2008. That didn't help. Barack Obama kicked all those people, those families out of their houses just to, help the banks be able to basically, sell those properties to other people, foreclose on them. And, man, if you think these people care about you, they don't. They care about power. They care about influence. They care about money. That's what they care about. That's the main takeaway. But it is 313 day. So, you know what I'm saying? Go listen to a Detroit playlist. You know what I'm saying? Go throw some Detroit rap on. Throw your D-fitted on. If you rock Buffy, throw your Buffy's on. You know what I'm saying? It's 313 day. We can still be happy about something, right? It's Shane G. This is Ethos Media Network. This is, of course, Politics as Usual. Please like, please share, please subscribe. And if you like the content, please become a member on Patreon at patreon.com/Ethos Media Network. Next time, peace.